Will you no longer take your children back to the UK?
I think it's probably too soon to tell and too soon to say. But obviously pretty gutted about the decision. We thought it was going to go our way.
You may fool the press and you may fool the public, but you don't fool the crown forever. Those words framed a rare public message delivered this morning by Princess Anne from the Balmoral estate. The setting was sharp and restrained, the tone unmistakably firm, and the timing impossible to ignore, coming just as global attention focused on Prince Harry's emotional appearance in Geneva. There was no softness in her delivery, no hint of reassurance, only finality. Rather than offering sympathy, Anne referenced the well-known parable of the shepherd boy who cried wolf. She compared her nephew's repeated efforts at reconciliation to warnings that had been heard too many times without consequence. "We heard the cries again and again," she stated, explaining that trust erodes when alarms repeatedly lead nowhere. Her message landed hard, suggesting that even sincere appeals can lose their power when credibility has been exhausted. Across Britain, the reaction was immediate and heavy. This was not perceived as a personal rebuke alone, but as a broader signal from within the institution itself. For Prince Harry, whose recent return to the UK carried quiet hopes of repair and understanding, the statement appeared to close a door that many believed was already barely open. Earlier this month, Harry arrived in London under intense legal scrutiny, connected to his ongoing case involving Associated Newspapers Limited. Despite prior legal setbacks, reports suggested he felt confident, even optimistic, believing the proceedings might publicly affirm his position and restore some measure of standing. One source close to the case described his mindset as emboldened, framing the trial as a chance for validation rather than conflict. According to individuals familiar with the situation, Harry viewed this period as a potential turning point, not only legally, but personally. He reportedly submitted a formal request to meet privately with Prince William and Princess Catherine ahead of his arrival. The proposal emphasized reconciliation, privacy, and a desire to speak away from public view, but circumstances unfolded differently. On January 16th, just one day before Harry's scheduled return, William and Catherine departed for Scotland, where they were later seen attending previously planned engagements. While officials described the visit as routine, the timing left little room for interpretation. Any opportunity for a meeting quietly disappeared before it could begin. Throughout the court proceedings, no private reunion took place. Meghan Markle was not present, with her representatives citing family responsibilities and professional commitments. Court-adjacent sources indicated that no formal request had been made by her to attend, nor any public statement issued in support during the hearings. Days later, Meghan was photographed attending a private wellness summit in California, joined by business and investment figures. Her appearance drew online attention, not because of any official announcement, but due to public curiosity around the event and its high-profile sponsorship. Observers were quick to speculate, though no verified conclusions were established. One former aide, speaking generally, described such appearances as career positioning, emphasizing strategy over sentiment. While opinions varied, the contrast between legal tension in London and professional visibility abroad fueled renewed discussion around the couple's diverging paths. In an unexpected twist, renewed chatter began circulating about a potential match the palace had once considered suitable for Harry, years before his relationship with Meghan began. Though firmly in the realm of past speculation, the timing of these whispers underscored how quickly old narratives resurface when uncertainty returns. Her name was Lady Arabella Montclair, the daughter of a viscount, educated, polished, and firmly rooted in Britain's upper circles. She studied at St. Andrews University, graduating in the same era as Catherine, and by her early 30s was known for her quiet intelligence and private nature. Within royal circles, she was often described as elegant, composed, and deeply grounded in tradition. Arabella was admired for her love of horses, her interest in environmental causes, and her respect for military heritage. She moved comfortably within royal-adjacent spaces without chasing attention. Friends described her as calm, thoughtful, and intensely private, the kind of presence that never demanded the spotlight but naturally commanded respect. She was also close with Zara Tindall, and through shared charity work, she reportedly crossed paths with Harry in 2013 at a royal polo event. Over the years, they remained casually in touch, never publicly linked, but quietly familiar. By late 2015, family conversations reportedly emerged about whether a closer relationship might make sense. At the time, however, Harry was drawn elsewhere. According to reflections shared later by those around him, he believed he was choosing love over expectation. "I want to choose love, not what's expected of me," one insider recalled him saying. What he didn't fully understand then was that freedom and stability don't always stand on opposite sides. Today, Arabella's life followed a different path. She is married to a sustainability-focused entrepreneur and building a family away from public attention. For observers looking back, the contrast between imagined possibilities and lived reality remains striking, not as regret, but as a reminder of how different choices shape different lives. By 2026, Harry's vision of California freedom had shifted in tone. The royal structure was gone, but pressures remained, only reshaped. Without the stabilizing presence of Queen Elizabeth, public appearances increasingly felt transactional rather than purposeful. And Harry often appeared quieter, less defined, more reserved. At high-profile events, critics noted his reduced visibility. He stood beside Meghan at major ceremonies and media appearances, present but subdued. One former media associate described him as polite and well-meaning, but admitted he sometimes seemed unsure of his role within the larger production. In private conversations later referenced by acquaintances, Harry reportedly reflected on how his sense of identity had changed. He once described himself as driven by mission and service, but now feeling uncertain, like a supporting figure rather than a leader. The dream that once shimmered with possibility had grown complicated, layered, and heavy. What began as liberation gradually transformed into an internal reckoning. Not because of royal duty, but because identity can erode when life becomes overly curated. By early 2024, the imbalance was visible to many observers. Meghan's ventures moved quickly, while Harry's presence became more intermittent and restrained. Behind the scenes, those closest to him described a man searching for grounding. Once known for service, advocacy, and emotional openness, he now faced the challenge of redefining himself outside the structure that once gave him clarity. The struggle was not dramatic, but deeply human. For Harry, the most profound shift came not through courts or contracts, but through quiet reflection. Parenthood, responsibility, and long-term purpose forced questions he could no longer avoid. And in that silence, the distance between who he was and who he wanted to be became impossible to ignore. At the time, their youngest child was still very young, navigating early emotional development like many children do. Behind the scenes, however, priorities appeared to diverge. Meghan remained focused on rebuilding her global profile as a resilience and equity advocate, while Harry reportedly pushed for more stability at home. Those close to the situation described tension, not blame, but a widening gap in expectations. According to people familiar with their dynamic, Harry's concerns were often met with resistance. Discussions about slowing travel or setting clearer boundaries allegedly turned into philosophical clashes about independence and identity. What one person saw as caution, the other interpreted as constraint, and those conversations reportedly became more charged over time. The moment that unsettled Harry the most, according to multiple accounts, involved luxury items arriving without clear explanation. A former household employee recalled designer accessories and art pieces appearing sporadically, described as promotional or professional gifts. While explanations were offered, the lack of clarity reportedly left Harry uneasy. Whispers began circulating about connections to international business circles, particularly individuals known for funding large media and philanthropic ventures. No direct claims were substantiated, but several meetings between representatives were described as exploratory and professional in nature. Even so, the timing of those interactions reportedly fueled discomfort within the marriage. During this period, Harry was often seen attending events alone, appearing visibly strained. Observers noted a shift in his demeanor, quieter and more withdrawn. Friends later described his growing frustration as rooted less in jealousy and more in feeling unheard and sidelined within decisions that shaped their shared life. Requests for firmer boundaries allegedly escalated into sharper exchanges. One confidant said Harry felt reduced to a bystander in his own household, likening the dynamic to a partnership that had lost emotional balance. The marriage, in his words to friends, began to feel transactional rather than mutual. By mid-2025, the strain had reportedly reached a breaking point. After months of unresolved conflict, Harry quietly initiated legal steps toward separation, citing fundamental differences in values and communication. Meghan's representatives responded by seeking mediation, emphasizing reconciliation and privacy rather than escalation. As proceedings unfolded, a brief health concern involving their child reportedly caused Harry to pause the process. Court filings indicate the case was short-lived and quickly sealed, reflecting the sensitivity surrounding custody and family matters. The focus shifted back to mediation, away from public confrontation. From September through November, mediated discussions continued under judicial supervision. No final agreement emerged, but Harry chose to remain, prioritizing family stability. Those close to the household described ongoing disputes over routines, structure, and trust, the latter being the most difficult to repair. A former staff member summarized it simply: the arguments were no longer about logistics, but belief. According to private remarks later referenced by acquaintances, Harry felt his concerns were reframed as insecurity rather than addressed directly. The emotional distance, they said, became impossible to ignore. By the end of 2025, Harry stepped back entirely from interviews and public commentary. Meghan, meanwhile, continued shaping an independent public narrative centered on autonomy and reinvention. Industry observers noted a shift toward solo branding strategies and clearer separation of public roles. Professionally, momentum slowed. Their joint media projects faced internal reassessment, with executives citing creative challenges and audience fatigue. Some initiatives stalled, others quietly concluded, marking a noticeable change from earlier optimism. What remained was not a scandal, but a collapse of alignment. Two people chasing different versions of freedom, pulling in opposite directions. The unraveling wasn't loud or explosive. It was gradual, careful, and deeply human. By this point, Harry appeared stripped of momentum, visibility, and inner calm. Then came the podcast moment that changed the tone of everything. Sometimes the person you give your whole world to is the one who believes they made you. At first, listeners assumed it was aimed at his family. Now, many interpret it differently, as a quiet confession rather than an attack. What followed was never meant to be public spectacle. No press tours, no dramatic declarations, no explosive interviews. Just a low-profile legal filing, a subtle relocation, and the slow dismantling of a life once built for cameras and headlines. It was restraint, not rebellion, and that distinction mattered. Then, on January 23, 2026, Harry made a move that stunned even longtime observers. Through legal representatives in Santa Barbara County, he formally ended his California residency. The decision was framed not as a political statement, but as a personal reset, a symbolic withdrawal from structures he no longer felt aligned with. The implications weren't governmental, but emotional. To many, it signaled a clean break, not only from his marriage, but from an entire chapter of reinvention. Quiet financial adjustments followed. Staff contracts were settled early, assets were redistributed, properties were scaled back. It looked less like retreat and more like deliberate closure. By the end of that week, Harry had relocated to a modest, privately leased residence in Hampshire. No visible security presence, no entourage, no public messaging, just distance. Those familiar with the transition described it as intentional simplicity rather than loss. One handwritten note, later referenced by a former staff member, summed up the shift. "I lost myself, but I found a reason to start again." No explanation, no bitterness, just resolve. The words circulated quietly, never officially released but widely discussed. While Buckingham Palace maintained silence, Princess Anne once again addressed the moment with restraint. Speaking briefly outside a youth equestrian center, she was asked about Harry's latest decision. She paused before responding, choosing metaphor over confrontation. "We've all known a shepherd boy like that," she said calmly. "And sometimes, when the wolf finally comes, there's no one left to listen." She never used his name. She didn't need to. The message was unmistakable. What remained less visible were earlier efforts behind the scenes. Sources familiar with palace procedures later suggested Anne had explored discrete legal pathways in late 2025 that could have allowed Harry limited reintegration under carefully controlled conditions. Those efforts, however, never advanced. She believed he might return with sincerity, one longtime observer noted. But even patience has limits. The events surrounding his appearance in Geneva reportedly changed that calculation entirely. On the night of January 22nd, Harry appeared unexpectedly at a media ethics forum in Geneva. No handlers, no branding. Dressed simply, he spoke briefly, listened more than he talked, and left without commentary. It wasn't a comeback, it was a man stepping out of the noise. Whatever comes next remains unclear. But one thing is certain. This wasn't an impulsive exit. It was a deliberate withdrawal, quiet, controlled, and final in tone, if not in outcome. Harry approached the podium holding a single page of handwritten notes, his hands visibly unsteady. "I want to say this clearly," he began, addressing his father, his brother, and the institution he once fled. He admitted fault in some decisions, acknowledged confusion in others, and took responsibility for the damage left behind. It was brief, raw, and unmistakably personal. The clip lasted just over 3 minutes and spread instantly. But what stunned audiences wasn't the apology itself. It was the weight behind it. This wasn't a performance. It was a reckoning, delivered without anger, without deflection, and without demands. In the days that followed, attention shifted to concerns Harry raised privately rather than publicly. He referenced receiving information that made him question how stories about the royal family had circulated in recent years. No documents were released, no evidence was presented. The implication was caution, not accusation, and observers noted the deliberate restraint in his wording. As of January 24th, no official response came from the palace. No confirmation, no denial, just silence. To royal watchers, that silence spoke volumes. One former aide described it as a boundary moment, not rooted in rejection, but in preservation of the institution itself. With King Charles gradually transferring responsibilities and Prince William and Princess Catherine stepping into expanded leadership roles, the direction of the monarchy appeared clear. The focus had shifted decisively toward continuity and stability, not reopening wounds that had already fractured trust. Meanwhile, Harry returned to quiet isolation in Hampshire. Far from California's openness and far from royal formality, the house around him was still. The absence of noise only amplified his thoughts. Alone, reflective, and restless, he found himself stripped of titles and narratives alike. He was no longer a symbol or a spokesperson. He was simply a father facing the hardest decision of his life, whether to keep fighting publicly or to step back entirely to protect his children from another cycle of scrutiny. Those close to him described the conflict as relentless and deeply personal. Since his appearance in Geneva, Harry largely disappeared from view. Friends say his days became dominated by memories of missed moments and quiet guilt. Each hour away from his children weighed heavier than exile ever did. One longtime friend described his fear plainly. Staying close risked losing himself. Leaving risked being misunderstood forever. It was a paradox with no clean answer, only consequences. Between September and December of 2025, Harry and Meghan participated in court-mandated mediation under California family law, following his brief divorce filing earlier that year. The process was structured to reduce conflict and avoid a prolonged custody dispute. Harry reportedly proposed a shared parenting framework that balanced time across continents, emphasizing education, routine, and stability. Meghan declined the proposal, expressing concern about returning to environments she associated with personal distress. Despite additional sessions, no consensus was reached. What remains is not a legal spectacle, but an emotional stalemate. Two parents, two worldviews, and children caught between them. No villains, no heroes, just unresolved pain playing out behind closed doors. And as the dust settles, Harry stands at a crossroads with no script left to follow. Redemption, distance, or sacrifice. Whatever he chooses next will define not the crown, but the man. Two legal jurisdictions. Two courtrooms, one in Los Angeles, another in Santa Barbara County. The truce never fully settled. Harry eventually agreed to a temporary joint custody arrangement, but it came with strict conditions. Any international travel involving the children would require written consent from both parents. That consent, so far, has not been granted. As Harry remained largely out of sight, Meghan reemerged with unmistakable intent. On January 19th, just days before Harry's appearance in Geneva, she attended a high-profile global leadership summit in Abu Dhabi. The event was invitation-only, centered on women in leadership and influence, and attended by figures from technology, philanthropy, and international business. Her appearance drew attention, not for controversy, but for symbolism. Dressed in understated elegance, she spoke to an elite audience about independence, authorship of identity, and reclaiming narrative. One attendee described her presence as focused and controlled, suggesting the speech carried personal weight beyond its stated theme. Short excerpts of her remarks circulated online soon after. One line in particular stood out. "Sometimes love isn't loyalty. Sometimes love is letting go." Many interpreted it as metaphorical, others as deeply personal. Whether intentional or not, the words fueled conversation across media platforms. Public curiosity followed, as it often does, but no confirmations emerged. Observers connected dots. Commentators speculated about future ventures. None of it was verified, but the narrative momentum was undeniable. Meghan appeared to be repositioning herself on a global stage, independent and forward-facing. Days later, Harry reportedly received a brief personal message from Meghan. Not a call, not a public statement. Just a short recording reflecting on time, change, and acceptance. Those familiar with Harry's state of mind described the moment as sobering, not dramatic, but final in tone. According to people close to him, he listened repeatedly, then quietly prepared for another transition. No announcement, no spectacle, just movement. It was the opposite of how this story began. Behind the scenes, Princess Anne remained the only senior royal willing to engage on a practical level. Her involvement, sources say, was limited and precise, focused solely on facilitating potential child visit arrangements that prioritized privacy and stability, not reconciliation with the institution. Her team reportedly explored discrete options for supervised reunions in rural settings, away from cameras and public intrusion. The intent was access without exposure, support without reintegration. The line was clear and carefully maintained. Anne's position was described as firm but humane. Assistance would extend only so far. Family welfare mattered. Institutional boundaries remained non-negotiable. Compassion, yes. Restoration, no. Now, Harry stands at another crossroads. He may pursue formal legal modifications, or he may choose restraint, prioritizing emotional presence over procedural authority. Either path carries weight, and neither guarantees peace. What's clear is this. The story is no longer about escape or rebellion. It's about consequence, about parenthood, about the cost of freedom when it collides with responsibility. The boy who once dreamed of leaving the golden cage has learned a harder truth. Freedom isn't distance, it's clarity. And in this fractured saga, his children may be the only compass left pointing home. 3 days after Meghan appeared on stage in Abu Dhabi, presenting a polished message of renewal and independence, Harry surfaced quietly in Geneva. No handlers, no security spectacle, no advance notice. Just a microphone, a modest forum, and a man who looked like he had finally reached the end of his silence. When he spoke, it wasn't theatrical. It was restrained, deliberate, and heavy. He described feeling misled, emotionally exhausted, and deeply disoriented by decisions made around him. "I was manipulated in ways I didn't understand at the time," he said, clarifying that he took responsibility for his choices, but no longer for the narratives built around them. What shocked listeners wasn't anger, but clarity. Harry explained that he had recently learned information that made him question how certain stories about his life had been shaped and shared. He did not release documents. He did not name companies. He did not accuse publicly. He spoke instead about consent, trust, and the pain of discovering things too late. According to those present, Harry described receiving unexpected material earlier in the year that forced a reckoning. He framed it not as proof of wrongdoing, but as a wake-up call about how exposed his private life had become. The issue, he emphasized, wasn't commerce. It was exclusion, being left out of decisions that involved his own story. He also addressed rumors without feeding them. He acknowledged that audio fragments and messages had circulated online, but stressed that authenticity and context were uncertain. What mattered to him, he said, was how easily private moments could be distorted once control was lost. One moment stood out to those listening. Harry spoke about boundaries around family life, especially when children are present. His tone softened, not accusatory, not dramatic, just tired. The kind of fatigue that comes from years of emotional friction. After Geneva, attention turned immediately to the palace. Cameras followed Prince William and Princess Catherine, hoping for reaction. None came, no statements, no briefings, no visible shift, just business as usual. The very next day, William and Catherine appeared at a public engagement focused on children's health. They smiled, spoke with staff, and remained composed despite shouted questions. Observers noted the precision, silence as strategy. Behind the scenes, insiders described the response as final. The Geneva remarks were interpreted not as reconciliation, but as a closing signal. One aide described it as a moment after which no further engagement would be offered, not out of cruelty, but containment. Catherine, according to those familiar with her approach, urged restraint above all else. Dignity, focus, protection of the children involved, no escalation, no response. Let the moment pass. Harry now lives quietly under a private custodial arrangement in Hampshire. No platform, no role, no script, just reflection. Friends describe him as subdued, introspective, and aware of his own part in how events unfolded. Those closest to him say the betrayal wasn't the only wound. The deeper pain came from recognizing his own participation in choices that carried unintended consequences. That realization, they say, changed him more than any headline ever could. This chapter doesn't end with a villain or a victory. It ends with accountability, with a man confronting the cost of surrendering agency and learning too late that freedom without clarity can become another kind of cage. For years, Harry defended Meghan publicly, even as quiet doubts chipped away at his sense of truth. Now, with mounting questions and 2 children caught in the middle, he faces a choice no parent should ever have to make. speak again and risk losing access, or stay silent and surrender any chance of reclaiming his dignity. The dream they once sold to the world is gone. What remains, as one former aide put it, is just a man, 2 children, and a life that no longer belongs to the headlines. The gates have closed. The phone no longer rings. The background whispers from the palace have faded into stillness. And for Harry, once second son to a future king, once brother to a man destined for the throne, the silence is louder than any scandal. In the quiet of his temporary home in Hampshire, Harry no longer lives in exile, but in the aftermath, not only with regret, but with an understanding deeper than any tabloid narrative could offer. Some paths once abandoned cannot be retraced. Some crowns once set down are not waiting where you left them. As global coverage of his Geneva appearance continued to ripple outward, Princess Anne addressed the situation one final time. Speaking calmly during a Commonwealth Armed Services roundtable in Edinburgh, she was asked directly whether Harry had any path back into royal life. Her answer was measured, firm, and unmistakable. "The monarchy is not a boarding house," she said. "You don't return between storms. When someone chooses to leave, they accept the consequences. Privacy can be offered, rehabilitation cannot." It was not cruel, but it was cold, and it marked the clearest institutional line ever drawn. As Anne stepped away without taking further questions, the message echoed far beyond Westminster. Harry is now the boy who once lived in the palace, not the man who will return to it. The distinction could not be clearer. On that same day, Meghan moved forward publicly. While Harry's reflections dominated headlines, she launched a new platform centered on resilience, equity, and storytelling. The announcement was polished, deliberate, and unmistakably solo. There were no references to marriage, royalty, or titles, only identity, autonomy, and renewal. The launch video opened with her walking through a garden in white, calm, and composed. "Sometimes," the narration said, "we have to leave behind the story others gave us and write the one we were meant to live." To supporters, it was empowerment. To critics, erasure. Either way, it was final. Very little is publicly known about the children's daily lives by design. What is confirmed through court filings is that they remain primarily based in California, continuing their education in a private program. Harry maintains scheduled remote contact and limited in-person visits under agreed conditions, centered on privacy and stability. According to one mutual friend, Harry recently declined an opportunity for a visit, explaining simply, "I won't see them through lenses. Not again." That choice reflects the central tension of his journey. Love for his children weighed against the machinery of exposure that once defined his life. In early January, Harry reportedly drafted a private letter to his father, King Charles III. It was never formally delivered. Those familiar with it say the final lines carried no demands, only recognition. "I understand now that duty is its own kind of love," he wrote. "I just wish I had learned that sooner." No reply ever came. There will be no balcony reunion, no ceremonial return, no public reconciliation. The chapter, as Britain once knew it, is closed. Where noise once ruled, there is now quiet. In Hampshire, Harry spends his days walking, gardening, and writing. Some say he's begun a private manuscript, not for release, but for his children. A story that begins with a boy in a palace and ends not with a throne, but with a lesson. Don't chase crowns, chase peace. As the monarchy moves forward under new stewardship, Harry remains absent from the official record. No reinstated roles, no ceremonial honors, his chapter frozen in time. Yet among those who once knew his mother, his story isn't dismissed. "He wasn't broken," one retired staffer said quietly, "just wounded, and maybe he thought love would heal that." No ceremony marked the final rift. No crown fell. Only the realization that freedom without clarity is just another kind of prison. And perhaps that is the final lesson. A prince who runs from duty may escape the palace, but duty has a way of following. Silence may not be justice. but sometimes it is the only mercy the crown has left to give. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. If this story made you think, hit like, subscribe for more deep dives, and share your thoughts respectfully in the comments. We'll see you in the next one.